Hi. As I predicted, the terror attacks are happening thick and fast in Britain right now, aren't they? And obviously they are, because there is an agenda to satisfy here, and a distraction is needed, a very heavy distraction, in order to protect the real criminals who are organising, training and funding and arming, and also inviting and facilitating the kind of terrorist threats and terrorist actions that a lot of countries are now experiencing via these sporadic attacks in our societies, which are designed to heighten tensions, fear, suspicions, and also do increase prejudice. My heart goes out to all the friends and families of the people who've suffered as a result of this. It is a dreadful thing, and you know, I've been looking at the Manchester reports, and there's lots of people saying that it's hoax, trying to suggest that nobody died. Doubtless there'll be the same flurry of investigations claiming that this was a hoax will be on again. But as I say, regardless of whether or not these events are real or staged, it really doesn't make any difference. We know that they are instigated and orchestrated by the people who stand to gain most from the resulting terror threat and the powers that they then give to themselves on the strength of their terrorist threats. And again, as I did in the Manchester video, I refer to the Jewish mother who refused, after her daughter was murdered in a suicide bombing attack in Israel. This Jewish mother refused to share in the hatred against Palestinians, and instead she stated her understanding that the suicide bomber, who was not much older than her daughter that had been killed by that suicide bomber, she recognised that both the suicide bomber herself was a victim, and she focused her attention very squarely and firmly on her own government for instigating those kind of terrorist attacks by the very fact of their own inhumane, cruel and unjust actions towards the Palestinian people. And in the same vein, how easy is it for these terrorist organisations, which we know are often headed by MI5, people who work for MI5 or MI6 or the CIA or Mossad, they're recruited by them, they act as mouthpieces, voicing this, what true Muslims now refer to as Daesh, okay? They don't serve Islam, they serve the opposite of Islam while using the banner of Islam, a bit like the Ku Klux Klan use Christianity, but we know they're not Christians, and we know these ISIS people are not true Muslims. And this is why I'm making this video. It's on behalf of all the good people of Britain, and especially for the families who have suffered in these terrible attacks, and to help people to understand really what is going on, and for us not to be distracted and not to be well, actually manipulated, emotionally manipulated towards supporting the New World Order stroke global criminal cabal, their present agenda, which is to divide every nation between, you know, the general populace and Muslims. Okay, and it is a strategy. It is a strategy because they want to protect themselves. They have got an agenda. They have got an agenda, and they have created this terrorist threat. They've, as I say, funded and fed it and trained it and recruited. And we know that in every society there's mad people. There are people who get very angry and upset at what they're witnessing happening in the Middle East. As a Muslim, how easy is it to persuade somebody who's already mentally unhinged, who's now seized upon the atrocities committed by the West in places like Iraq, who then sees an opportunity to justify going out and committing acts of terror, and they will be recruited by the operatives who we now know are working for the CIA and MI6 and MI5 and Mossad. We know this. Look at my Manchester video. Look at the links. It's all there. The very worst people really issuing the most terrible propaganda about the West and Muslims and blah blah blah, all working for MI5 and MI6. You know, one guy, Aswad, known to be directly involved in the 7/7 plot, is found to be an MI5 agent or an MI6. You know, both are implicated. And we've only got to look back to the banking crash. A couple of years after the banking collapse, what have we got? Just as Britain is in the thick of the recession that started to hit, people are losing the jobs, they're losing the homes. What do we see emblazoned on the British news media? Pictures of disabled people under the headline Scrounger. Pictures of immigrants. Scroungers. Well, whichever way we look at it, it's not disabled people, it's not people on benefits, it's not immigrants, and it's not Muslims that have caused this world global banking collapse. It's not Muslims or benefits claimants or immigrants, okay, that have robbed the British people of our pensions, our jobs, our homes, who now wants to take over providing everything. They've taken over providing childcare for British children, they're taking over our social services, even our police force. The British government has now invited DynCorp in, a private global security military service. And wherever these people are, you're going to find these terrorist attacks. And whether they are just, whether this one or they're just sporadic incidents of some people being driven crazy by what's going on, or whether they are orchestrated, whether they're real, whether they're hoax, it doesn't matter. They're all a result of this government's criminal actions in the Middle East. You know, we've got a government that supported ISIS in Libya. This country went and bombed Libya on behalf of ISIS. They've been bombing Syria and engaging in war crimes in Syria on behalf of ISIS. Who now is controlling Iraq? ISIS. When we look at the simple facts, what do we find? That the so-called war and terror, why is it that after how many years since, in the wake of 9/11 and the official conspiracy theory was put forward and accepted by every government in the world, all of whom decided that they can just ignore the laws of physics in favour of supporting a conspiracy theory, an officially endorsed conspiracy theory? And then there's the war on terror, and now we find that virtually the whole of the Middle East is now being controlled by ISIS. So on the one hand, we've got our government abroad protecting ISIS, bombing and killing innocent people on behalf of ISIS, even supplying weapons to Saudi Arabia, who, what is the difference between Saudi Arabia and ISIS when it comes to chopping people's heads off, a brutal regime that refuses to uphold human rights? And we're selling them weapons to bomb the Yemen, who don't want ISIS. No, no. Wakey, wakey time. Wake up, Britain. And turn, you know, who is responsible for this attack? Our government, our so-called intelligence agencies. They are responsible. And why? Because they're not serving us. They're serving the Zionist bankers who are calling themselves Jewish. And we know they're not Jewish. Okay? Because nobody who truly believes in God could ever do the kind of things that those people are doing. They've robbed the whole of our society. They've robbed every single nation. But no, we're not. We shouldn't even look at them. Be kind to the bankers, David Cameron said. They're above the law. How can that be? How can that be that my friends get robbed of their £200,000 pension? That I'm witnessing people, you know, driven to depression, illness and suicide because they're losing their jobs. Nurses committing suicide because they're overworked and they're even having to depend on food banks. But no, we're supposed to all instead put all our anger and upset and everything into hating Muslims, aren't we? Because that is what these people want. They want every country to be like Israel and Palestine, with a conflict, the same conflict in every country in Europe, in America. We need this divide, don't we? Between our Muslim citizens and the non-Muslim citizens. That's what they're doing. Divide and rule. And it is absolutely despicable and disgusting. And, you know, I know that the British people aren't falling for it. I know if you look at Twitter or Facebook and a lot of online chat room forums, you know, and see all the Muslim hate that comes out as soon as something like this happens, all the haters suddenly feel free to, you know, share their horror stories about Islam and their hatred. Okay? But as we know, the internet is absolutely full of organised, paid trolls who are paid to keep the momentum going, to invite such negative opinions. And Muslim people are being attacked. Innocent Muslim people, children at school, are being attacked on the strength of the rhetoric that comes after these kind of horrors that Britain is now being subjected to. But let me tell you something. If your country goes abroad and illegally invades a nation and kills 1 million of its people in the guise of protecting them and installing ISIS in there and using depleted uranium, expect some trouble. You know, if I'm living in a household with my family and a member of my family is going out committing atrocities and making profits and bringing them back and all my family is benefiting from that, then I should expect some kind of retribution at some point from the people they've been out attacking, from their families. And that is the situation we are in, Britain. And it is despicable that our government has been able to get away with the crimes that it has, and the British people haven't risen up. I mean, we did stand up and say we don't no to the war in Iraq in no uncertain terms, and we were ignored. And now we find out that it was all done on the strength of a pack of lies. And now we find out they're protecting, you know, they've helped establish ISIS in Libya. They've established ISIS in Iraq. And now they're helping to establish ISIS in Syria. But here they're telling us that ISIS are a terrorist threat and that they're waging a war against terror. It is absolutely outrageous. And so what we need to do as a nation now is to stand together and refuse to accept this propaganda rhetoric that is now being shoved down our throats. And I blame you, Theresa May. I blame you, Parliament. I blame every single MP in Parliament who is still got their bottom stuck to those green seats. And while this country has been committing the most horrendous crimes against innocent people and children abroad. And, you know, in my name, in our name, and after people like my granddad gave their lives for this country, for our human rights, and we did not get those human rights, so our government could then go and ignore them when it comes to Middle Eastern people, or people in the Chagos Islands, or Native Americans. We need to wake up to this, and we need to get united. Okay? We need to establish the law. Nobody should be above the law. These bankers need you, criminal bankers. You need arresting, investigating and arresting and prosecuting. You need to be brought to justice. Nobody should be above the law. And the moment that we arrived at that situation where we've got our government telling us that bankers are too big to prosecute is the very moment that we should have risen up like the Icelandic people and said, oh, excuse me. You think that we're going to ignore their crimes and bail them out and put an unrepayable debt, not just onto our children, but onto every future generation thereafter, because this debt apparently is unrepayable. And they're even charging interest on it, out of money they printed out of thin air. It's outrageous. That's the real threat. That's the real terrorist threat. The real terrorist threat is a country that covers up for and protects the worst kind of child abusers who are operating in every single authority in the land. And who have for decades been abusing children, murdering children, trafficking children, and covering up for each other and persecuting victims and witnesses. That's the fact. And we need to stand up now. We need to stand up and tell these Zionist bankers and all their crony politicians in Parliament to get lost, okay? Because we are not going to tolerate that consciousness. We are not Israel and Palestine in Britain, okay? And what is happening in Palestine is disgusting and despicable, and it's gone on for far too long. And the only reason why they've got away with it is because they do control the whole banking system. You know, the real terrorists are people like David Cameron. Gordon Bowden has got the goods on him. The guy's guilty. There's enough lawful suspicion there for him to be immediately arrested and prosecuted for financial crimes that have robbed British independent businesses and pensions. And Gordon Bowden has all the evidence. But no, we won't look at Gordon Bowden, will we? Instead, we'll give absolute top publicity to every mad person putting a mask on and calling themselves a Muslim. You know, a terror attack which left 7 people dead and 48 injured. It is absolutely terrible. It is a terrible thing. And the people are left very traumatised. Everybody who's been touched by this are very traumatised. And now the vulnerable. It's a well-known fact that victims of horrific crimes like this are left traumatised and therefore vulnerable, easily manipulated. And it is designed to increase terror. He stepped outside the bar for a second, and a man ran up to him and said, "This is for my family, this is for Islam," and stuck a knife into him. This is for my family, this is for Islam. Really? Muslims that will do that during Ramadan? It's totally anti-Islamic. Now we're being sold that every single one of the attackers was shot dead. Really? The people that did this surely must have known that they're not helping Islam, are they? They're not helping Muslim people or Islam by doing things like this. They're just making it worse. No, no, no. This is a terror. We need to understand that the real terrorist threat in Britain, it isn't Muslims, and it's not Muslim terrorists. It is our own government. Our own Zionist government with our Zionist royal family. Now either they turn around and denounce Zionism for the evil, racist, fascist philosophy that it is, or else they need to leave this country. They need to step down from their thrones. They've got no business. She has got no business being a queen in our country if she supports Zionism. Zionism, we know, has funded and created this, and is now killing our citizens, and they're expecting us to now turn our attentions to hating each other and fighting each other on the streets. In our communities, instead of turning round fairly and squarely to these bankers and saying to them, get lost with your crap, your evil money system, your evil debt and your evil philosophy that has created all these wars, and you've killed over 1 million Iraqi people and children, and they're now having their heads chopped off in the streets, and we're paying the bill for it as well. Well, you can fuck off, Theresa May, you evil bitch, okay? And I blame you for this. I blame you for what's happened in Manchester. I blame all of you sat in Parliament, you evil, disgusting scum.